Thank you. Good morning, and may the force be with us on this new trip around the sun. So, I wanted to talk about uh, some things we've learned about Joseph Campbell and the truth of mythology. And what I've noticed, I've actually talked to several people, and they're just not clear on what mythology is and what it isn't. So, when we hear the word mythology, we tend to have these connotations of these visions of Zeus hurtling lightning bolts down and Thor battling frost giants while Loki's causing some chaos and destruction, things like that. And it in short, mythology usually falls into a discussion of the gods and heroes and all sorts of creatures, and even in the shall we say the Lucasian sense of the word mythos, it has brought us all together in this place. So there are many reasons, I would say, for the existence of myths. And one reason that I've found in my studies is when early humans started to form societies and they stopped worrying about, well, where's the food going to come from. And they started thinking about things like, where did we come from, and what is the extent of my existence? Is this all there is? That sort of thing. And so they kind of created the metaphorical stories to come up with some kind of answer. And that's what Joe Campbell had talked about, is that mythology is a metaphor. And there's a story that he had put out a long time ago, um, about a he was on a radio interview, and the host uh, told him that the the popular belief is that myths were lies. And Joe Campbell corrected him, and he said no, myths are metaphors. And they went back and forth on this idea for a few minutes, and he finally said Campbell finally said, well, give me an example of a metaphor. And the host thought about it, and eventually said, well, so and so is very fast. He runs like a deer. And Campbell replied, that's not a metaphor. He said, so and so is a deer. That is the metaphor. And the interview kind of ended due to time constraints, so we never really got the end of that discussion. But the host was talking about a simile, of course, and not a metaphor. And so when people started to come up with the stories, it was their way of understanding, because they didn't have the words for scientific phenomenon that was happening. They didn't have those concepts yet. So they just kind of put it in accord with what they knew. So they created gods for every occasion, household gods, um, gods for bringing the sun up and putting the sun down, and planting the crops and that sort of thing. So um, one of the things that Campbell has said is when we become that we actually become part of the mythology when we enact the rituals that are attached to it. So that's kind of how we keep the mythology going. That's where the truth of the mythology lies. Is so what Campbell said was a ritual is the enactment of a myth, and by participating in the ritual, you are participating in the myth. And since myth is a projection of the depth wisdom of the psyche, by participating in a ritual, participating in the myth, you are being, as it were, put in accord with that wisdom, which is the wisdom that is inherent within you anyhow. So is anybody familiar with the ancient Hindu ritual uh, called sati?
No,
Um,
I can't say I am.
okay, so it's they haven't done it for hundreds of years, and in fact, modern Hindu societies, like in India, I think have actually even outlawed it. But what it was, sati is Sanskrit for to be, and it says that when a husband dies, the wife will throw herself on the fire, on the funeral pyre, and join the husband. And um, and as they lived together, they would die together, and it was considered, excuse me, at least at the time, hundreds of years ago, of course, long time ago, but um, it was kind of the highest honor that a wife could bestow on her husband. And in the West, we would call it committing sati, but in the ancient customs, it was becoming sati. You were becoming part of the myth. You were becoming part of the tradition that had been set down for centuries before. And it was, actually, like I say, in that particular custom, that was one of the best things that you could do. But when we look at it, at the psychology of it, so when we look at like the hero's journey, the monomyth, as Campbell called it, and the hero's journey, I think everybody is on their own hero's journey, whether it's saving somebody, whether it's whatever the journey is. I mean, even just growing up, particularly in today's world, is kind of an adventure in and of itself. So when we look at the hero's journey, there's initially the refusal of the call, to adventure, and that is, um, psychologically speaking, um, we tend to need familial security, particularly from our parents. So it's hard to kind of let that go. But then when we transition into, move out of our childhood and into adulthood, that is, us moving on the path to adventure. Like we've accepted, okay, this is what I have to do, and I'm moving forward with this. And then we often see in mythology where the hero or the heroine meets a male or female figure, that is somewhat magical. So in the case of Star Wars, Luke met up with Obi-Wan and he became his guide. So for us, um, we could say that, um, being an educator myself, we could say that that role could be seen in a favorite teacher or a professor. I know I've had several that I have had guide me through the years. Even to this day, I still have old former teachers and professors that I call on to say, well, I'm looking at this in my class. What 'cause I'm a teacher now, and I'll say, how can I make this better? Can you help me make this better? And we also tend to go through some kind of dark period in our lives, where we have some sort of struggle. And that's, what we would call maybe the belly of the beast. And we find different ways to get through that. Um, some turn to spirituality. We, you know, come together in the Jedi temple for us and that sort of thing. But we usually find some means to get out of that difficulty, and we often find ourselves transformed into something other than where we started when we began the journey. So, um, that I think, when we look at the psychology of where we're at, um, that's we connect to not only mythology itself, but to many of the stories that we find when we look into it. We can say, oh, I relate to that because so this happened to me, and my journey is not unlike this person. So, um, I mean, does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Because that's kind of all I had to say in terms of, just kind of connecting us to what's out there.
I think you've got a good analogy of our hero's journey just being growing in life.
Hmm.
Because I mean, we all start, you know, without knowledge, without wisdom, without intelligence, really, and then we're taught from parents, teachers, and then those many people along our path that we receive information, guidance, and insight from. And I mean, that's just a process of growth. But the experiences we go through, I mean, there's multiple opportunities in life to say, no, I don't want to take that adventure, or you know what, let's see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so we have multiple opportunities throughout our life to be on our own hero's journey, and the culmination of everything that we've experienced and gone through, and that part of our life that we have experienced, we are the wise man at some point in somebody else's hero's journey.
Yes. Yeah. It always shifts. It always shifts. As they say, the student becomes the teacher at some point. I've always found that to be true.
That's actually when you become the master of two worlds, that you can become the teacher,
Yeah.
which is at the
Yep.
end of the journey.
Yep. For sure. For sure. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that with folks today.
I liked it. That was a nice workshop, and it was nice and lengthy, but not too lengthy, and so you were straight to the point, so good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think she just called me out for talking too much.
Well, that happened.
That's okay. You had to call me out earlier, Allie. Well, you had to cut it short.
Yeah.
I I remember something that Miles said, and that a lot of people say. You don't have to be in the community to learn. Sometimes I think a lot of people come in, including me, having attachment to a certain extent, thinking that you have to be here to learn. So I think it's important for the hero in general to acknowledge that life itself, as you said, is the best teacher. That's how you learn to apply what you're learning, how to apply the philosophy to your daily life. And so allowing yourself to come in then out without staying around too long, or like just like being harmonious is important and stuff. And then if you deny the call or you don't answer it, you're fighting the process. And I think when you're called to learn, when you're called to teach, when you're called to develop yourself as a future leader in legacy, it's important to know that you might not always feel ready. I mean, I've been the epitome of that this year. But you just have to navigate everything and keep moving forward and do your best. Because you will fail, you will learn, you will grow from it. And that's part of life. And the cyclical nature of the hero's journey is important because that's a continuous thing. It's not just oh, I learned the end of the cycle. It's like continuous. That's all I have to say. Nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything to say before I hit the unrecord?
Very nice.
Stop recording.
Very nice work. Very nice work. Nice and easy well done presentation.